The ranch had grown quiet, in a way Selena never got used to. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that settled after loss, heavy and unmoving. The wind still swept across the open plains, rattling the dry grass and creaking the old fence posts. But the laughter that once filled the house was gone. Even the horses seemed subdued, their hooves slower, their breaths softer, as if they, too, remembered the man who used to walk among them. Selena stood on the porch of the ranch house, arms crossed against the morning chill, staring out at the land that had been her life for the past 12 years. Once it had been a shared dream. Now it was a burden she carried alone. Her husband Daniel had built this place with his own hands. Every fence line, every weathered board in the barn told a story of his stubborn determination. When he died 2 winters ago, thrown from a horse during a sudden storm, Selena had promised herself she would keep the ranch alive no matter the cost. But promises didn't pay debts. She glanced down at the folded letter tucked in her pocket, the edges worn soft from being read too many times. Another warning from the bank. Another reminder that time was running out. A sharp whinny pulled her from her thoughts. One of the mares was restless near the far fence, pawing at the dirt. Selena sighed and grabbed her hat, pulling it low over her dark hair. Work waited, no matter how heavy her heart felt. She had just reached the corral when she noticed something out of place. A man, he stood near the fence line, tall and lean, his back to her as he examined a broken rail. A dusty coat hung from his shoulders, and a wide-brimmed hat shaded his face. He looked like he'd stepped straight out of the horizon, quiet, weathered, and entirely unexpected. Selena's hand instinctively tightened around the handle of the shovel she carried. "Can I help you?" she called out, her voice firm but cautious. The man turned slowly. His face was lined by sun and travel, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his eyes an unsettling shade of gram at hers, without flinching. There was something guarded about him, something careful. "Fence looked like it was about to give," he said. His voice was low, calm. "Didn't want your horses wandering off." Selena studied him for a moment, weighing her options. Drifters weren't uncommon, but that didn't mean she trusted them. "I didn't ask for help," she replied. A corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "No, ma'am, you didn't." He tipped his hat slightly and stepped back from the fence. "Name's Troy, just passing through. Figured I'd fix what I could before moving on." Selena hesitated. Pride told her to send him away. Practicality reminded her she couldn't afford to turn down free labor. "The barn roof's leaking," she said finally, "and the north fence isn't much better than this one." Troy nodded once. "I can handle that." She watched him for a moment longer, noting the way he moved, efficient, controlled, like a man used to hard work and harder roads. There was a sadness about him that felt familiar, like a shadow he couldn't quite shake. "Don't expect payment," she added. "I don't," he said simply. As Troy turned back to the fence, Selena felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't trust, it wasn't hope, but it was the first crack in the silence. By the time the sun climbed high enough to burn the morning chill away, Troy had already repaired 2 fence posts and reinforced the sagging rail that had worried Selena for weeks. He worked without complaint, without asking questions, his movements steady and practiced. Selena watched him from the barn doorway, pretending to sort tack while her eyes followed the rhythm of his labor. He didn't work like a man looking for a quick meal or a place to hide for the night. He worked like someone who understood land, who respected it. Selena finally set the saddle aside and stepped closer. "You travel with tools often?" she asked. Troy paused, resting his weight on the hammer. "Only the ones I can carry." That answer told her very little, and somehow everything. She handed him a canteen. "You'll need water. It's hotter than it looks." He accepted it with a nod, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest moment. The contact surprised her, sent an unfamiliar warmth up her arm. She pulled back quickly, annoyed at herself. "Where you headed?" she asked, mostly to fill the silence. "West. Troy replied after a moment. Always west. Selena frowned. That's not much of a destination. P shrugged. Never needed one. They stood in silence, the only sound the wind whispering through the grass and the creak of the barn. Selena realized how long it had been since another voice had shared her days. Even simple conversation felt strange, like wearing a coat that didn't quite fit anymore. When Troy returned to work, she turned her attention to the horses. As she brushed the dust from their coats, her mind drifted to the past, back to the days when Daniel had worked beside her, teasing her when she fell behind, promising that the ranch would one day be the finest in the county. That dream now felt like a ghost. A loud crack snapped her back to the present. She spun around to see Troy steadying himself as a board gave way beneath his foot on the barn roof. "Are you hurt?" she called, her heart jumping. "I'm fine," he said, though he sat still for a moment, catching his breath. "Roof's worse than I thought." She climbed the ladder without thinking, stopping just short of him. From this close, she could see a thin scar cutting across his left brow, faded but unmistakable. "You should have told me," she said, irritation laced with concern. "I don't need another body on this land." His eyes met hers, serious now. "I won't be one." The words hung between them, heavier than they should have been. They worked together the rest of the afternoon. Selena handed him boards and nails, surprised at how naturally they fell into rhythm. Troy spoke little, but when he did, it was thoughtful, never wasting words. She found herself laughing once, a sound that startled her so much she covered her mouth. Troy looked at her then, really looked at her. "You don't do that often." She lowered her hand slowly. "No," she admitted, "I don't." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Troy climbed down from the roof and wiped his hands on his coat. "That should hold through the season." Selena nodded. "You've done more in one day than I've managed in a week." "Hard to do everything alone," he said quietly. She stiffened, unsure whether to be offended or grateful. Instead, she surprised herself by saying, "You can stay the night. There's a spare room." Troy hesitated, something guarded flashing in his eyes. "I don't usually stay." "Neither do I," she replied softly. "But the nights get long." After a long moment, he nodded. "Just for the night." As darkness settled over the ranch, Selena felt the silence shift. It was still there, but now it listened. Supper was a quiet affair. Selena set 2 plates on the small wooden table, the extra one feeling strangely symbolic. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cooked for someone else. The stew simmered too long, and the bread came out a little dry. But Troy ate without complaint, thanking her in a way that sounded genuine. The lamplight cast long shadows across the room, softening the worn edges of the furniture. Troy sat with his back straight, eyes alert, even as he rested. Selena noticed how he never fully relaxed, as if some part of him was always listening for trouble. "You don't talk much," she said, stirring her stew. "Talking never kept me alive," Troy replied. She studied him over the rim of her spoon. "You sound like someone who's had to learn that the hard way." His jaw tightened just slightly. "Something like that." Selena let the question go. Loss had taught her when silence was kinder than curiosity. After supper, she cleared the dishes while Troy stepped outside. When she joined him on the porch, the sky had turned a deep violet, the first stars blinking into existence. The land stretched endlessly before them, beautiful and unforgiving. "You ever think about leaving?" Troy asked, suddenly. She folded her arms, leaning against the post. "Every day." "Then, why don't you?" Selena swallowed. "Because if I leave, it's like admitting it's over. Like admitting he's really gone." Troy nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she'd said. Running doesn't always mean freedom. They stood shoulder to shoulder, not touching, yet close enough for her to feel the heat of him. It unsettled her how easily his presence filled the space Daniel had left behind. Guilt pricked at her chest, sharp and unwelcome. That night, sleep refused to come. Selena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person in the house, the creak of floorboards, the faint cough from the spare room. Part of her felt foolish for letting a stranger stay. Another part felt safer. A soft noise outside broke the stillness. Selena sat up, heart pounding. She slipped on her boots and reached for the old rifle by the door, moving quietly down the hall. The moonlight guided her to the porch, where she froze. Troy stood near the barn, a lantern in hand. "What are you doing?" she hissed. He turned, unsurprised. "Your mare's loose." Sure enough, the restless horse from earlier had broken free, wandering dangerously close to the open range. Together, they moved slowly, guiding the animal back into the corral. Troy spoke in low murmurs, calming her with practiced ease. "You're good with them," Selena said, when the gate was secured. "Animals don't lie," Troy replied. Easier to trust. As they walked back, Selena noticed his shoulders tense when a distant howl echoed across the plains. "Wolves?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "Sometimes worse." She frowned, but didn't press. Back inside, they paused in the hallway, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Selena realized how close they stood, how easily she could reach out and touch him. "This ranch," Troy said quietly. "It's worth saving." Her throat tightened. "So was my marriage." Troy met her gaze, his expression solemn. One doesn't erase the other. For a moment, the past loosened its grip. Selena felt something dangerous and fragile bloom in her chestnut love. Not yet, but the possibility of it. "Good night, Troy," she whispered. "Good night, Selena." As she returned to her room, Selena knew one thing for certain. Letting Troy stay had changed more than the silence. Morning arrived on the ranch with a pale, uncertain light. Selena woke before the sun, as she always did, but this time the house didn't feel quite as empty. The knowledge that Troy was still under her roof settled strangely in her chest, both comforting and unsettling. She found him already awake, mending a bridle at the kitchen table. "You're up early," she said. "Never really slept," Troy replied, not looking up. Something in his tone made her pause. "Bad dreams." He tied off the leather with a firm pull. "Old ones." Selena poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs and set one in front of him. He accepted it with a nod, their fingers brushing again. This time, neither of them pulled away too quickly. After breakfast, they worked the land together. Troy showed her how to reinforce the corral posts using stones from the creek bed. A trick he said he'd learned a long time ago. Selena didn't ask where. She was beginning to understand that his past was something he carried carefully, like a wound not fully healed. By midday, a cloud of dust appeared on the far road. Selena stiffened. "We don't get many visitors." Troy followed her gaze, his body going subtly rigid. "Who's that?" "Evan Miller," she said bitterly. "Neighbor rancher. He's been waiting for me to fail, so he can buy this place cheap." The rider dismounted with a confident swagger, eyes sweeping over the land like he already owned it. "Morning, Selena," Evan called. His gaze flicked to Troy, lingering too long. "Didn't know you had help these days." "Just passing through," Troy said evenly. Evan smirked. "Funny, folks passing through don't usually fix fences." Selena stepped forward. "What do you want, Evan?" He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Heard the bank's getting restless. Thought I'd make you an offer before things get unpleasant." Selena's hands curled into fists. "I told you before. I'm not selling." Evan leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Pride's an expensive thing for a widow." Before Selena could respond, Troy shifted beside her, not threatening, but solid, unmovable. She said no, Troy said calmly. Evan studied him for a long moment, then chuckled. "You got a name, Drifter." "Troy." "Well, Troy," Evan said, mounting his horse, "you might want to move along. Trouble has a way of finding this place." As Evan rode off, Selena's breath came out shaky. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You didn't sign up for this." Troy watched the dust settle. "Troubles followed me longer than I can remember." That evening, they repaired the north fence together, working in near silence. The unspoken tension from Evan's visit lingered, but so did something else. Trust. "You don't scare easy," Selena said. Troy glanced at her. Neither do you. As the sun dipped low, Selena stopped and pressed her boot into the dirt, drawing a rough line between them. I need to be clear, she said softly. I'm not looking for saving, and I'm not ready for feelings. Troy met her gaze, understanding in his eyes. I'm not here to replace anyone. The honesty in his voice loosened something inside her. Then you can stay, she said. For now. Troy nodded once. For now. As night settled over the ranch, Selena realized the lines she'd drawn weren't just in the dirt but around her heart. And for the first time since Daniel's death, she wondered what it might mean to let someone cross them. The storm rolled in, without warning. Dark clouds swallowed the sky by mid-afternoon, the wind whipping across the plains with a restless fury. Selena secured the shutters, while Troy checked the horses, his movements quick and purposeful. Thunder cracked overhead, sharp enough to rattle the windows. By the time the rain came down hard and heavy, they were both soaked and breathless, taking shelter in the barn. Selena laughed despite herself, pushing wet hair from her face. This place never does anything halfway. Troy leaned against a post, water dripping from the brim of his hat. Storms don't ask permission. The thunder grew closer, and with it, something else stench in the barn, felt smaller, the space between them charged. You could have left this morning, Selena said. After Evan, Troy's eyes darkened. I thought about it. Her chest tightened, and I stayed. The truth of that settled between them, heavier than the rain. Another boom of thunder made the horses restless. Selena moved to calm them, but one reared suddenly, knocking a crate loose. It crashed to the ground, narrowly missing her. Before she could react, Troy was there, hands gripping her arms, steadying her. You okay? He asked urgently. She nodded, shaken, painfully aware of how close they were. His hands were warm, grounding. For a heartbeat too long, neither of them moved. I can't lose this ranch, she whispered. It's all I have left of him. Troy released her slowly. You won't. She searched his face. You don't know that. I do, he said quietly. Because I've already lost everything once. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Silence followed, broken only by the rain on the roof. Troy turned away. There are things about me you should know. Selena's heart pounded. He exhaled, heavy and slow. I wasn't always a drifter. I used to wear a badge. Marshall left it behind after a case went bad. People died. People I was supposed to protect. Selena absorbed this, the pieces clicking into place, the scars, the vigilance, the way trouble seemed to recognize him. You running from it? She asked. Living with it, Troy replied. And I don't want it touching you or this place. The storm began to fade, the thunder rolling farther away. Selena stepped closer. You think your past makes you dangerous. I know it does. She looked out at the rain-soaked land, then back at him. So does loving something enough to lose it. Troy met her gaze, something raw in his eyes. That's what scares me. They stood there, the truth laid bare between them, fragile but real. As evening fell, they returned to the house in silence, both changed by what had been said. Selena lay awake that night, replaying Troy's confession, her heart torn between fear and something deeper. Outside, the storm passed, leaving the land washed clean. And in the quiet that followed, a choice waited to be made. The morning after the storm dawned clear and bright, as if the sky itself had decided to offer the ranch a second chance. Sunlight spilled across the wet grass, turning every drop of rain into a brief shimmer of hope. Selena stood at the window for a long moment, watching Troy walk the fence line, checking for damage left by the night's fury. She hadn't slept much. Troy's confession echoed in her mind. Marshall badge, lives lost. Once, such a truth might have frightened her away, but loss had changed her. It had stripped her fear down to something simpler, the fear of being alone forever. She stepped outside, the cool air filling her lungs. You don't have to fix everything in one day, she called. Troy glanced back. Habit, they worked side by side, quieter than usual. Yet the silence felt different, now honest, unguarded. When they paused near the creek, Selena finally spoke. You could leave, she said. After telling me all that, Troy nodded. I know. Are you going to? He studied the moving water. Every place I stop, I ask myself the same thing. Stay and risk hurting someone. Or leave and keep hurting myself. She swallowed hard. And here, Troy met her eyes. Here, I want to stay. The words were simple, but they landed with weight. That afternoon, Evan Miller returned. This time, he wasn't alone. 2 men rode with him, their expressions sharp and calculating. Selena felt the old fear rise, but Troy's calm presence steadied her. You've got nerve coming back, she said. Evan sneered. Bank doesn't care about nerve. They care about money, and you're out of time. Troy stepped forward. You're trespassing. Evan laughed. And you're what? Her hired muscle. Troy's voice remained even. I'm someone who knows the law. Something flickered across Evan's face. Uncertainty. Selena spoke up. I've already filed an extension. And if you keep harassing me, I'll see you in court. Evan hesitated, then spat into the dirt. This isn't over. As they rode off, Selena's knees nearly gave way. Troy caught her elbow. You okay? She nodded. I just realized something. What's that? I don't have to face this alone. That evening, they sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The sky burned gold and red, like a promise written across the horizon. You're not replacing Daniel, Selena said softly. And I'm not asking you to. Troy turned toward her. I wouldn't. She reached out then, resting her hand over his. This time, the touch didn't feel dangerous. It felt right. Stay, she said. Troy's fingers tightened gently around hers. I will. As darkness settled over the ranch, Selena realized the land felt alive again, not because the past was forgotten, but because the future had finally arrived. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western Story.